Hey everyone, Ryan Mense here, and in today's video I'm taking a look at the Sony a7S III, and I've been shooting with it for the past 10 or 11 days now, filming and photographing wildlife and birds in particular. It's kind of what I do. I got my list of notes here that I'll run through of the things that I liked and didn't like about it so much. But without further ado, let's just jump right into it and get started. All right, first up, Sony. Good job with the recording option. Oh, wait, this is the stuff I did like. Okay, I liked the recording options. So the 4K 120p, that's like a dream for me. Not only is it doing the 4K 120, it's also in 10-bit 422, and that's really going to open up a lot of options for me, especially post, being the amateur that I am, so I can fix my shaky footage with the stabilization. I can level my footage, which I'm probably not going to be able to get too well in camera with my tripod without like a leveling base. I can also, fix up the composition a bit. So maybe I see something in post that I didn't see in the field where I maybe want to punch in a little bit or move the frame a little bit over to make it look more pleasing. I can do that. So doing all that in 120 is pretty incredible. Obviously, you can still do like 4K 60 and 4K, the lower options. Also, to add on top of that is the full HD 240p in the slow and quick mode. I mean, for capturing the action, it's great. But if you sit there and you start recording when nothing's really happening, that 240p is really stretching out the time. So you really got to use that for the special moments, I guess, that you really want people to focus on. Those little actions, those little, where a bird's looking or an animal's looking or their eye movement and stuff like that. Just capturing those little things. And then if I'm doing intense action, 240 is probably not a great idea because it's just it kind of draws it out too much in my opinion. So the 4K 120 looks great if you're trying to do like action movements and slow that down. But either way, 4K 120 and full HD 1080p with the 240, just really good stuff to use. 10-bit 422, also you can finally unlock the S-Log 3 gamma. With the previous Sony cameras, I mean, they had S-Log 3, but you're really pushing that file around a bit too much and you might end up with like banding and stuff. But with the Sony a7S III, it really does open it up. And so kudos to Sony. Recording options of this camera are looking really nice. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, but my coffee here, it looks like the iPad is like on fire. I wonder if I can get my view count to go up if it might look like the a7S III is overheating. Can you see it? There we go. It overheats. Look at that. Just kidding. I didn't get it to overheat once. All right, so next up is going to be the autofocus, but I don't want to get carried away too much because the autofocus is still, I mean, for what I do, like the birds are still kind of small in the frame and stuff, and it doesn't pick it up too well. But I will say the touch tracking can be very helpful in certain situations. And so like if you have a lot of separation or your subject is very clearly defined in a frame, there's a lot of contrast between the subject and, everything else happening. Touch tracking is actually going to probably be like way more accurate than you manually focusing will ever be. Plus, it's a lot easier because you can sit there and just watch the scene and maybe pan around instead of having to make sure your focus is just getting spot on as well. So it also opens up like really shallow depth of field shooting because, like I said, it's going to be more accurate in that as well. I will say though, like the general autofocusing of this camera for what I do, I mostly stayed clear of it. I just had, as you would expect, I tried it, had some bad experiences, and decided, I'd rather have myself make the error in focusing than somehow that feels better than having it set to autofocus and the camera makes an error. At least it's on me, you don't have to sit there and be like, oh, the camera messed up. Like, I'd rather have that be on me, and I feel like I can get past it easier than if I miss a shot because of the camera's autofocus. That's just me though. On the photography side of things, I'll say that this camera has about a 2/3 stop improved performance as far as noise goes. With like the A9 and the A7R4 and stuff, ISO 8000 is kind of around the limit for like a usable photo in my opinion for those cameras. And with this one, I'm finding the same about 12,800 ISO. That's a great improvement. I mean, it's not, you think the A7S and you think shooting at midnight or something. But in reality, for what I do, like a 2/3 stop, maybe if you really push it and you're really good at noise reduction in post, maybe like a full stop, better improvements. Next up is going to be a design feature. Or maybe like a programming feature, I guess. They moved the button for the video recording up top, but it's not really like that doesn't really matter, because the important part is they made the video button customizable now. And so before, your video button on the back had to only be start and stop recording. Whereas now they moved it to the top, but also the video record button, it doesn't matter that it's on the top or the back or anywhere, because you can set up any button to start video recording and you can turn the video record button to anything else. Another nice improvement is going to be when you're using auto ISO, which I don't do a ton, but it is useful when it's like a partly cloudy day and the light's constantly changing and it just starts becoming annoying to keep changing the ISO or whatever else. Before, when you do an auto ISO, it stays, the display says auto, and it doesn't change until you have pressed the shutter, and then it will actually tell you what the auto ISO is going to be. Now, on the A7S III, it will say auto for like 5 seconds, maybe 3 seconds, and then it will switch over to whatever the value actually is. And it will also like update in real time. So if you like move the camera a bit and now it's like a darker scene and the ISO jumps up, it will display that. It won't just say auto and be useless. So I guess in some ways I can see that being annoying, in that like you kind of maybe might forget that you're in auto ISO, but I think we're smarter than that, and I think we deserve to be able to see on the display what auto ISO is actually doing. Another cool improvement, something that I've requested before, however it's not quite as to the extreme that I would suggest, but it's a start. So now you can move the focus point when you're in spot or flexible expandable spot. Is that what it's called? You can move those in greater increments now. So before, which is now called standard, it's like little pixel by pixel movements when you're moving them by the joystick. And now you can set it to large, so there's greater increments when you're moving them, and that comes in handy. Say you're shooting something on the left rule of thirds or something, and you decide to change up your composition, and now you want the subject on the right rule of thirds. There's just like less button pressing to get your focus point to the other side. What I'd like to see still is like a 9-point, and so just like a couple clicks over, instead of now where if you use large, it's still quite a few clicks, but it's a start. And yet another improvement is going to be recall custom hold is snappier, which is something I also requested, in part saying just everything should be snappier, but recall custom hold. So you can set up your camera to have a bunch of settings change all at once if you hold on a custom button. And then when you let go, it goes back to the settings that your camera was at before you press the button. And that's really helpful for if you want to like quickly switch your focus area, or you want to quickly switch your shutter speed, or all that and a combination of that all at once. It's really helpful. And now with the Bionz XR processor that they introduced with this camera, everything just seems a lot more snappy. There's room for improvement as always, but I got to give credit where credit's due. This camera is a lot more snappy than the other Sony cameras. Next, I just got to bring up how lightweight and compact this camera is, because it's just really incredible what they've been able to do. And you might be thinking to yourself that it's obvious, like, of course it looks the way that it does because all the other Sony Alpha cameras look that way. But you have to consider what they put into this camera, like all the recording options that I already talked about. That's just incredible. Like, none of their top-of-the-line cinema cameras can do what this camera does, yet it's way smaller than those. Thinking back to the FS5 Mark II that I had before I was testing the A7S III, I would have to partially disassemble that camera every time I wanted to put it back in my backpack, whereas this is obviously just, tosses in and fits pretty much anywhere. I don't have it built up, to be something where I do have to start taking it apart. That might be necessary for some people, but it's just really, really mind-blowing what they've been able to pack into such a tiny camera. And then finally, something that you cannot not talk about is the price of this thing, because If you're interested in this camera and the recording options and the autofocus and the fact that it's a hybrid, you can do photos and stuff as well. This is going to be way less expensive than like a cinema camera, and you're probably going to have way better recording options with this camera as well. So it's something that's weighing on my mind as I'm trying to buy a cinema camera. So this is still not off the list because that price is just really, really good for what you get out of it. Now we're going to move into the things that I did not like about my experience so much shooting with the A7S III. First thing is going to be that the fact that there's no Super 35 crop mode in 4K is just a limitation of the 12 megapixel sensor, I'm assuming. To overcome that, I used the 1.4x teleconverter much of the time, if not always, when I was shooting video with this camera. I will say that it does do clear image zoom if you're doing 4K 24p, so you can do a clear image zoom of 1.5 times in that mode. Otherwise, there is Super 35 crop available in many of the Full HD 1080p recording options. However, the only reason I'm really using Full HD in this camera is for that 240p, like I talked about already. And in 240p, there is no available option to use crop mode, Super 35. So that's a bummer. And then something I only picked up on the past couple days as I've been shooting photos with the camera is when I'm using the spot small focus area, I notice a lot of times it's focusing behind whatever that spot is on. So say if I have it over a bird, it's focusing past the bird and to whatever's behind that focus area. It's really weird. I'm not sure, like, you know how there's like stabilization issues with the R4 in this lens? I don't know if it's because of like this lens combination with the camera that it's doing something weird, or if it's like from the 12 megapixel sensor where there's not enough information for the phase detect, and I don't know how these things work. I'm just reporting what I see, and that's the small spot focus area is just kind of being ignored and it goes past it a lot of the times. It's weird and I don't like it. I hope you saw this one coming because I hope you're thinking the same thing, really. The flip out screen? No. What? The flip out screen is so bad. Like, it ruins the camera pretty much, in my opinion, to the point where, you know how I'm thinking of, like, this is still on my list of cameras that I might buy, but there's the stipulation, if I do buy it, that I have to get a recording or like a external monitor for this camera in order to bypass having a stupid flip out screen. It's, first of all, it's absolutely terrible if you're doing photography. But for video, it's really, really annoying, for me at least, with a telephoto lens. And I mentioned this in the FS5 Mark II review video. When you're looking through the lens and you have that offset of the screen, it's really hard to find subjects in a telephoto lens. So that offset is just, it ruins the video experience for me personally, which is, you know, I have to get a recorder and make it like in line with the lens again. It's just too bad, really, that like they already have other cameras that do it right. If they really needed like a flip out screen, they should have used the A99 Mark II. The way they did that flip up screen is way, way better because it's a compromise for both sides of things. It doesn't suck for photography and it doesn't suck for video. It's the worst decision that they could have possibly made, and they did it on this camera. And then following that up is the fact that the flip out screen just feels really weak and flimsy. So it's not even done well. Like it feels like it's going to snap off under a year tops. In the 10 or whatever days I've had this camera, I've hit it pretty hard, like a couple of times with my body, and I had to like check and like, oh God, did I just snap that off? So it's definitely going to happen. It feels so weak. That connection has that little single connection with like a single screw. That thing's getting snapped off, no doubt. And then another thing with the LCD screen, I will say that this isn't like, I'm aware that you can't have it both ways. So it's nice that it's small, but in the same way, it's also not great that it's small. It just makes manually focusing that much more difficult. So I went from the FS5 Mark II to using this camera. FS5 Mark II I think has like a 3.5 inch screen, whereas this is a 3 inch. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but it was a major difference going to the smaller screen after using the 3.5 for a while. I know it's not easy to just say, well, they should have made the screen bigger on this. I'm just saying it's nicer to have a bigger screen, like a 3.5. There's not much you can do about that, but 3 inches is pretty small when you have a video-centric camera. I would have liked to see it bigger somehow, modifying the body. I don't know. Can't have it both ways. Next, I want to talk about the new menu system. And you might be like thinking, why is this on the negative list? I'm only putting it on here because when you first get this camera and you've been using Sony Alpha cameras for a long time, it's really rough to set up. I won't tell you the time that I spent setting this camera up. I'll tell you the battery percent, and that's going to be 56% battery life that it took me to set up the camera for the first time. It's way different. So things are named different. Things are in different areas. You can't just have like an older Sony camera and set it up like side by side with this one and go through the menus and knock it out. You have to really go through this menu line by line and make sure, it's what you are expecting. You're learning new things about it, like what it can do now. So it's negative in the fact that you're going to have to spend a lot more time setting this camera up. But I know in the long term, it's going to be fine. Talking about the files, the recorded files, once you get them off the memory card and on the computer, they are just not, they don't talk with the computer. They're not on speaking terms. So what I mean by that, you can't like open anything in Finder on a Mac. You can't, simply just start playing it in preview or, cull your video files down that way, see what's good, what's not, and trash it. It's a pretty rough experience. So you have to like either transcode things or load them into like a Final Cut or something, make proxies of them. It's just kind of like a grating experience once you get your files on the computer, especially my computer, which is like 5 years old at this point, I think. Everything's like really slow to play back. And what I found, I'll give you a little pro tip here if you're in my situation. Cull on the camera, which sounds weird to, I come from a understanding that you should never, delete things off the memory card on the camera because that's going to be bad and stuff like that. I don't know. It's just what I've been told. So I've always followed it in like the 15 years or whatever I've been shooting. But I will say for this camera specifically, if you cull on the camera, it's going to make your life a lot easier. And I learned that kind of late. So just going through everything that you recorded, because it's going to play back smoothly and you can actually see everything and you're not going to be wasting your time with footage that you never wanted in the first place over on your computer where it's going to take a long time to actually see it if you want it or not. And a couple of usability things. There's no waveforms yet on Sony cameras for whatever reason. I guess they just don't like video people very much. The other thing is going to be the fact that on the display, there's no start, stop, record like touchscreen button that you can just use. And that would come in handy because there's a lot less vibration with just like tapping the screen just lightly versus having to press in a physical button on the camera. So I noticed you always got to give yourself like a 1 second space if you're pressing record on the camera to kill those vibrations of before you get a usable clip going. And then on the actual camera body, the exposure or lock button is also here, and that's on the A9 II and the A7R4, where you can lock and unlock it. But thanks to whoever used this camera before me, so I got this camera from Lens Rentals, and it came kind of dirty to me for whatever reason. But the person that used it before me, thanks to them, I noticed that there might be some durability issues with this whole lock-unlock mechanism. I already knew from my experience of owning the R4 that it can get frozen in the winter. So if you get like ice or like water or snow melting to create ice inside it or whatever, it'll just lock into whatever position you already had it, so you can never unlock or unlock it. I noticed apparently if you get like dirt in there, that same thing kind of happens to where it got stuck. So like trying to unlock it, you kind of had to wiggle it around a bit to get it to unlock. and then you press it to lock it again, and then you have to do the same thing. And I kept on doing it over and over again, and eventually it started freeing up. And so now I can lock and unlock it with just a button press. So I don't know if there's like a little piece of dirt in there or whatever that I kind of crumbled up as I kept on doing it. But that's good. That's going to get really annoying if you are shooting in dirty conditions a lot. If you have it locked and unlocked and you use that a lot, something to keep in mind, I guess. I will say this really terrible idea of having this a constant lock on the mode dial is still present. I don't know why they should. First of all, they don't need an unlock and an unlock. I'll tell you that. They just need it to not exist at all, because this is the stupidest thing in the world. I don't understand why Sony has a locking button on the mode dial. It will always perplex me because it annoys me every single day. And then I might as well just run through the other things that annoy me. Strap lugs, stupid design as always. What else we got? The control wheel on the back is still tiny and plasticky and awful. I already mentioned the lock on the mode dial. Also, there's no anti-fog measures. There's no coating or anything on the EVF or the display screen, which still is really annoying because I shoot in cold and I fog those up at least a few times a day. All right, now that Crabby Ryan has had his say, there are a couple notes that I just want to go over. These aren't good or bad things. These are just a couple things I want to talk about. First up is the 9.44 million dot EVF, which when it was announced, that just sounds like it would be mind-blowing and crazy, and there's a lot of hype behind it. I'll say that after using it, I don't really notice anything different really about it. So I used to own the A7R4, which has a 5.76 million dot EVF. And based on my memory, it's like the same to me. I don't notice anything. It's still digital looking, still has like the same kind of drawbacks as an EVF, detail-wise. So yeah, 9.44 million dot. I don't know. And then the other note I just wanted to talk about is the high ISO noise reduction option in the camera. So there's like a normal, and then there's low, and then there's off. I find that the regular normal ISO reduction, it creates too smeary of a photo. So my suggestion would be to use low, which seems to play better with noise reduction in post. So if you don't do post processing like a crazy person, I guess maybe use the regular one. But for everyone else, I'd switch that to low if you're doing high ISO stuff. All right, so that's going to do it. And I guess my final thoughts about this camera is it's Sony being Sony, and I mean that in a good way. And it's Sony being Sony, and I mean that in a bad way. So it's really an incredible piece of technology that they came up with here. It's just kind of held back by things that Sony has already, been doing wrong with their cameras, and they're kind of going in the wrong direction with that flip out screen, in my opinion, too. It's just I don't know. It's hard. I'm coming to this review of this camera as someone who is potentially going to buy it versus like a cinema camera, and for the most part, I don't know. It's so hard to decide because it's extremely good in certain things and it's really annoying in others. So I just can't decide if this form factor is right for me. Let me know in the comments what you think about the camera based on, everyone else's review that you've seen, based on maybe you own it already, and based on what you saw in this review. So thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.
you.